Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're an OG listener, welcome back, little Sparkly. If you're joining us for the first time, you should know everyone is welcome here.
They are. Whether you've put your creativity on pause during this time or you've clung to it like a lifeline, either way, you're welcome here.
But you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it? These are such good questions. We do have answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations.
And here's the deal. We are makers who make all kinds of things.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know that the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry, especially now.
But don't despair, because we're here for you, and we are on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity. Things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a new chapter of our lives based on intentionality and focus on joy.
Or a cruise ship style buffet of advice to fill up the belly of your soul.
Well.
How about that little piece of poetry?
How about that? Every episode, we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
And if you're not careful, you might just hear that puzzle piece click into place. So without further ado, let's open up
the Spark
File.
Hi.
Hi.
Blackwell.
How you doing, little Camion?
I'm good. I'm so good. You know why?
Why?
I'm so good, Suze, because I don't know if anyone listened to the podcast quite some time ago, that the spark that I did on Reservoir Noir.
Yes.
I am about to go back to Dale Hollow Lake for the Day Family reunion. And I'm super, super excited.
Hearing you talk about that place over the years, there is a peace that comes over you and a happiness. It's like happy relaxation that comes over you,
really
even when you
is.
talk about it.
Well, it's like, one, I like lakes. I like water.
I like big lakes, and I cannot lie. I do too. I love a lake.
I love a lake. I love a lake in the north where the things that I feel under the water are not likely to be alligators. I don't mind, a bass fish hitting me in the foot. but I do mind a gator. And I love West Day's family. I love West Day's family. It is an honor and a privilege to be a part of that family. And I love being around them. I'm reminded of what love and unconditional support is. And I love it. I love it. So, and it doesn't hurt that there is rarely any Wi-Fi. So I am unplugged in a different way.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I'm grateful that I get invited to be there and to spend time with the family.
That's beautiful. I'm excited for you. But before you go, how about a little spark exchange to fill you up and send you on your way?
I would love to have a belly full of sparks.
Well, get ready.
Nice and full and satiated.
The belly of your soul. Cams, this is a spark that I've been toting this around for a while, and I'm happy to shake it out of my spark file and share it with you. This was sparked by an article written by Dave Pogue in the New York Times, and the title of the article is "The Best Advice You've Ever Received and Are Willing to Pass Along." So Dave Pogue, if you don't know, is a tech writer and a TV host. He's a correspondent on CBS News Sunday Morning. He writes a column in the New York Times, and that's where this article appeared. Are you familiar with Dave Pogue?
No, I'm happy to get more familiar with him.
Well, I originally came to him as a tech writer. I would read his writing when I was thinking about buying a certain piece of technology or something like that. But now he writes about more than that. And in this particular article, Dave crowdsourced his readers to share the best advice they'd ever received. And they responded with advice, some of which I found was helpful enough and memorable enough that I popped it into Yieldy Spark file. So here it is.
This is awesome.
Some of the best advice,
I want some advice
Dave Pogue's Twitter followers have ever received that they're willing to pass along. So I just want to start with just to get us going, just some practical bite-sized minis. Somebody named Paulina Gomez shared, when you see a ball on the road, make a full stop. There's usually a kid running right behind it, which is just like good, practical advice.
Yes.
And if you're like me and you live in a remote location, if you see one deer while you're driving, slow down because there's usually a couple more nearby. That's the country version of that. Yeah.
Can I do one that doesn't involve
is it alligators?
A person or an animal?
Oh no! What were you going to say?
There's likely more. No, I was told never run over. Like if you see a bag on the road and you're just like, whatever, a bag's not going to hurt my car.
Yeah.
Don't run over it because there could be be a bottle in there that will, be crushed and then poke a hole in your tire. You don't know what's in the bag is the thing.
That's right. It's good practical advice. So, that's great advice.
Good practical advice. Sound advice.
Here's a piece of advice from Rory Evans. A $1 bill is a skosh longer than 6 inches. You've always got a small tape measure with you. If you have a $1 bill, or I guess any bill, $20, $5, it's just a skosh longer than 6 inches. So there you go. I never knew that.
Just account for that skosh.
That's right.
Account for the skosh.
That's
and
right.
You're golden.
Somebody named Margot Watson shared, boyfriends come and boyfriends go, but SAT scores are forever, which I thought was a really great way of saying.
Invest in your brain.
Great advice for teenagers. Great advice for teenagers.
Yes.
So let's just take it a little deeper.
That's smart. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Going a little
deeper.
This piece of advice actually has really, really stuck with me. It came from a person named Gail Decker. And it goes like this. Things don't have to be perfect to be wonderful. Things don't have to be perfect to be wonderful. And this is advice that Gail first heard a wedding coordinator offer to young couples who were really having wedding freak out. But it really does apply to all kinds of situations. Gail said that during a real estate hunt, my initial reaction was that there was something wrong with every condo I saw. My friend reminded me, a place didn't have to be perfect to be wonderful. She was right.
Yes.
I love that.
Boy, that is true. That's applicable
in
so many ways.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is definitely going deeper and a bit of a tangent, but in the world of the arts and performing in particular, how often can you think about like people who, or performances that were not perfect, and that is what made them more compelling? I'm thinking of like all those like college age kids like auditioning.
Yeah.
And here is perfection. Here is perfection.
Yeah.
It's like a bit of a snooze fest.
Yeah, a little too
And then
glossy.
someone comes,
Yeah.
it's like too much. And then someone comes up that's like, what? They barely got through that. And you're like, yeah, but there was something about it that was wonderful.
I think of it about like you're thinking about a job or a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship is wonderful. It is not perfect.
Whose is?
Yeah.
I mean, embracing those things that aren't perfect can, make it interesting, can make it spicy, can make it, worth the journey.
And I love your thought about, because we all, especially like whatever industry you're in, if you're in movies, if you're in theater, if you're in woodworking, whatever you do, things don't have to be perfect to be wonderful. So there are shows that we might see because we're in the industry, we might be super highly critical of them, but they don't have to be perfect to be wonderful.
That's right. Yeah. And you can be like, I'm criticizing A, B, and C, and yet I can't stop watching this.
I loved it.
I
can't stop singing the songs. Yeah. I love it.
That's right. That's great.
So that is something that really stuck with me. The next piece of advice that really stuck with me came from a reader named Christine H. I cannot tell you how much I think about this, Camian.
Okay.
Touch it once.
What?
This involves putting something away or completing it the first time you pick it up. That way you don't have to waste energy looking at it, feeling guilty about it, letting it get dusty so you have to clean it before putting it away. I love this. Touch it once moves me. It pushes me to move on things, make decisions about things, close loops. And it's not just for housework. It works for work tasks too. And Laura, you and I do this all the time. You may not know that I call it touch it once based on Christine H's advice, but you and I will be in a meeting and you'll say, we need to find a time to meet with this client, or we need to blah, 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 blah. And if it takes less than 2 minutes, we do it in real time.
That's right.
Which some people call the 2-minute rule, which is if you can do it in less than 2 minutes, do it now. If your time allows.
It takes more time to add it to your list and come back to it later.
Touch it
than
once.
Just do it.
Touch it once.
I like it.
Right?
I like it. Yeah.
Here we go. Reader Maddie Scott contributed some advice that she received at the funeral of her husband. Sleep on his side of the bed. Sleep on his side of the bed. Maddie said, it's truly the best piece of advice I've ever gotten. The effect was profoundly comforting, and it greatly lessened the ache of missing his physical presence. I will also say, Laura, this feels like a scene from a movie to me. It feels like a little bit of a story arc where someone dies and someone, a wise person at the funeral says, sleep on his side of the bed. And then you see it happen. I love this. It feels like such a cinematic spark to me. Sleep on his side of the bed. It
really does.
Yeah.
It really does. Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I can also see why it was truly useful to Maddie. And I hope I remember it if I'm ever in that situation. But hopefully I'm going to die before all of you, so I don't have to be sad about it. So we'll see.
Oh.
Wow.
No, now I'm sad about it.
It took a turn.
It took a turn, but it also reminds me of like, in addition to like the perhaps not causing you to not miss them physically quite as much, if you've ever battled any amount of depression or just a tough phase, you often hear advice like, just change one thing.
You have said that before.
If you're used to putting, your right leg into your pants first, right leg, then left leg, just try, I'm going to go left leg and then right leg. And it occurs to me that this is similar, that it's that one thing that you're sleeping on a different side of the bed. It is making a shift for yourself that is different than, it's shaking things up in your brain
disrupting thought. I love that. Mm-hmm. Here's a fresh one. Here's a freshie. Melissa
Yeah.
Fanning contributed, take a breath. Take a breath.
Yes.
Melissa heard this from a yoga teacher at a corporate retreat about which she remembers nothing else. It wasn't a yoga instruction. It was a suggestion to pause at stressful moments to avoid saying or doing something regrettable. And Melissa said, I use this advice every day. It has preserved peace, calmed me, and made me appear smarter than I am.
Yes.
Take a breath.
Yes. Yes.
Take a breath.
That is the cousin to one that took me a while to learn, but you don't have to do anything. Meaning, if you have that impulse to try to fix things, something's wrong, it must be dealt with. Actually, take a breath. You don't have to do anything.
I learned
right now.
a piece of that from you and from Nathan recently. We were considering working with a vendor. We had a lot of questions for the vendor. And at some point, the vendor got really salty with us about the number of questions that we had asked. And I mean, really salty via email. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. And this helps me organize my thoughts. I started drafting a response about, we're just curious and we want to know the ins and outs of this thing. And we're sane, I promise you, and how to kind of get us back on track with the relationship. And then I was sort of like, oh no, I don't want to work with a vendor who
I don't think so.
is salty with us when we're curious or asking questions and learning. And both you and Nathan were like, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to email the person back. And I said to Nathan, but I feel like I'm not going to be able to rest until I close this loop. I have to express myself and close this loop. And Nathan said, no, they closed the loop. They closed the loop when they sent you that email, which was very rash of them. They didn't take a breath.
Yeah.
You don't have to do anything. Both you and Nathan were like, we don't have to do anything.
Have to do anything.
And Nathan took it one step further with, they closed the loop for you. And I was like, okay. And it really brought me peace.
They did.
Yeah.
They essentially said, if you're going to have this many questions, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And we were like, we are going to have this many questions.
We're going to keep having this many questions because we are curious.
We're going to have these questions.
We're awesome. And we think you'll find we're fun to work with. That's what I said in my email, but we are going to have questions. But ultimately that email still sits in my drafts, never to be sent.
Yay!
Because why? Take a breath. Number 2,
take a breath.
Sometimes you don't have to do anything. And number 3, they already closed the loop. 3 great pieces of advice.
No, they closed.
They did. I loved it. I have to tell you, immediately, the sense of peace that washed through my body that was some great advice from you and Nathan. Speaking of advice, in the category of parenting advice, couples therapist Kellen Klein and his wife contributed this advice. The greatest gift you can give to your children is your own emotional well-being. Oof. The greatest gift you can give to your children is your own emotional well-being. And I would say that's actually true in any relationship, whether it's parent-child, a creative collaboration, a business partnership, a romantic relationship. The greatest gift you can give to the people in your life is your emotional well-being. I think that is good advice. Not always easy to achieve, but good advice.
But it's so good. It's such good advice because it is that, put your oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
That it is like, what is it about us that like we're somehow taught, we're competing with this other message that is like, to be a good person, you put others first. And no, you actually cannot be a good partner. You cannot be a good parent. You cannot be a good anything without taking care of your emotional needs first.
Your emotional well-being. I agree. And it's easier said than done. It's sometimes it's not easy to have a big life and, have the responsibility of those relationships and achieve that. But I love we had a potential client just reach out to us, and they were talking about we always say, we're not therapists, do you tend to your emotional well-being? And their response was so great about all the ways that they tended to their emotional well-being. And it really delighted me, because I was like, that's the kind of person I want to be in relationship with, whether they're a client, whether they're a business partner, whether it's my spouse, a friend.
Yep.
Yeah.
Collaborator,
parent, all of it.
for sure.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Great advice.
In the realm of work advice, here's a favorite. This is from Gregor Gilliam. When you go into a job interview, have questions ready. Inevitably, the interviewer asks, do you have any questions? And when you do, in fact, have questions, you show that you're inquisitive and curious and eager to learn. Gregor goes on to say, having been on the interviewer side, I'm amazed by how many people simply say, not really, I'm good. And I never hire those candidates.
That's right.
I have had the same experience where you say, do you have any questions? And there's typically a couple of ways people respond. One is, this has been, I think I've got a good sense of it. That's one way to answer it. Another way is, I have given some thought to and I've prepared some questions, but actually this dovetails into a piece of advice I give to people going into job interviews, or not necessarily auditions, but work session auditions. And that is to treat it as a mutual assessment process, to go into it, treating it as a mutual assessment process. So yes, they are gathering information. They need to see if you can do the job and be a cultural fit, but you are equally assessing if this is work that you will love and people that you'll love to work with in a culture that you'll love. So I encourage people to enter into the meeting like that, just sort of forward-footed and present and curious with questions at the ready. So it's not that you're just going to appear to be thoughtful and curious, but that you're actually really
thoughtful and curious
so that you can make a decision about what you want to do with your one wild and precious life.
Yes. Yeah. And that also says something about you.
It sure does.
It is, without saying something, it says something.
It has the added benefit of leveling the dynamic so that you are positioned eye to eye with that interviewer or auditor, and you're not subordinate to them. So it's not just saying, have some questions prepared so you look thoughtful and curious. It's saying, shift your mindset to, this is a mutual assessment process. So no one is above me, no one is below me, haters to the left. And you are, as they are in an information gathering, exercise.
So are you.
You are as well. And I think that it just does this balancing act, even if it's just an inside job. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Gail Steele shared this piece of advice: greet people with their first names. They're delighted. So this is an interesting piece of advice, Gail Steele. Greet people with their first names. They're delighted. This is doubly challenging for me because I get this puff of adrenaline when I meet new people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will knock somebody's name right out of my head.
Yes.
So
100%.
I have to really work to remain present and calm and remember people's names. And also because I'm an introvert, but it really does make a difference. I've noticed this starting a new job and meeting a lot of people and learning a lot of people's names, that when 3 days later, when I say, hi, Jenny, just as I pass them in the hallway or on set, how it does make a difference. And it does it makes it okay to talk with each other. It bonds people. So I think this is a deceptively excellent piece of good advice.
I agree. And I've seen you do it. I think it's simple, elegant. Perfect.
Swelligant. Advice contributor Catherine Kunicki, fresh out of art school, heard famed furniture designer Charles Eames on a local radio show.
Ooh.
And Catherine Kunicki called in to ask his advice. And this was Charles Eames's advice: never accept work where you're not learning. Never accept work where you're not learning. Now, that's a very privileged piece of advice, because I don't know that
you're right.
all of us always have we're not
option.
always in a position to accept work where we're always learning. Sometimes you just have to go work at the General Motors plant getting a repetitive stress disorder on the assembly line. But
Right.
I love the aspiration
And sometimes that's the best job there is in your town.
That's right.
Some of those jobs are.
But if you can't always be learning, I think it's a great way to live and work.
That is, you're right about all of that.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Charles Eames and Catherine Kanicki. So this next piece of advice that I'm going to share with you, Laura, these are just getting deeper and deeper for me, but this next piece of advice has really, really made an impression on me. And it's three little words. Don't pickle things. Don't pickle things.
Oh, yes.
So that line, contributed by reader Sam Singer, attributed to Sam Singer's mother, means if you have something special, use it now. Serve daily meals on your good china. Wash your hands with the luxurious soap you received as a housewarming gift. Drink that bottle of amazing wine you received right away. Don't save things for future use, because who knows what the future looks like. And this reminds me of a piece of advice that I tucked into my brain years ago that Oprah Winfrey shared. This is something that the event planner Colin Cowie had given her, which is use your good things. Don't wait until you're dead for somebody else to use your good stuff. And Laura, I think about it all the time when it comes to, name it, clothing, shoes, cloth napkins, craft supplies, and sparks. And sparks, Laura, when it comes to sparks, I think that sometimes people hold back their best stuff in hopes that they're going to use it for something later. But in Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, which I reference in pretty much every other episode of this podcast, Anne says this.
The Spark File, brought to you by
Bird by Bird.
Bird by Bird.
Anne Lamott. Anne Lamott says this in that book. Annie Dillard has said that day by day, you have to give the work before you all the best stuff you have, not saving up for later projects. If you give freely, there will always be more. I think I've even said this on this podcast. I think I've quoted this quote on this podcast. Day by day, you have to give the work before you all the best stuff you have, not saving it for later. If you give freely, there will always be more.
I mean, I think this is part of the genesis of the Spark File and why we wanted to be like, give it away, give it away, give it away.
Yeah. Give it away, red hot chili peppers. There will always be more.
There will always be more.
And I have to say that there are times, don't get it twisted. There are times when I do feel depleted, where I'm sort of like, ooh, we've been working for 9 months straight and I need a vacation, and I have to restock my fish pond. There is that.
That's right.
That's a real thing. But this idea that you're saving an idea for some, I might make a television pilot, or I might put it, or I have it. And also there's the distinction of if you haven't found a place for it yet. But if something is burning a hole in you and you're waiting to tell the story until you can tell it perfectly, get to work. Start writing.
Get to work. That's the thing. I feel like you don't have to give everything away. Like, keep the things that you are going to do and do them.
Do them.
Like, really do them.
Do them.
That's the secret.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this in turn reminds me of an advice spark from Ira Glass. And many of you will have heard this, but I think we should hear it again as if for the first time, because it's that good. I'm about to read you a passage straight up quoting Ira Glass. So strap in, because it's going to take a second. Nobody tells this to people who are beginners, and I wish someone had told me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there is this gap. For the first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. but your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting, creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we want it to have. We all go through this. And if you are just starting out or you are still in this phase, you got to know it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work. Put yourself on deadline so that every week you will finish a story. Thank you, Sparkfile. It is only by going through a volume of work that you will close that gap, and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And I took longer to figure out how to do this than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You've just got to fight your way through. I think this is some really, really good advice.
I think it nails it.
But so many people don't want to hear this because it's not easy, it's not comfortable, and it takes just a lot of hours. You just have to clock a lot of hours and make a lot of stuff.
There's the Instagram meme that goes around every so often that's like, don't be afraid to suck at something new.
Yes.
And it is that sensation of like, oh, I suck at this, that keeps us from doing anything or like just pushing through until you can get better at it.
Yeah.
And I just think he describes it so well. And, I think that I have heard you share that quote before. I think we use it in one of our classes as well. And I just think it is so helpful for people. It's definitely, every time you remind me of it, I'm like, yes.
Well, by the time we see most people's work, it's fully formed. I mean, when we start seeing work in public space, it is fully formed. And so it's hard for us to imagine, I'm young Ira Glass. I'm not very good at this. Like, it's hard for us to imagine that. But trust. I think about some of our early work, Laura, and some of our compadres who we were sort of running with when we were younger. And what I think I have a good eye for is I can see raw talent and I can see the promise of things to come. And
that's right.
And then I will say, because we've been in the game long enough, it's exciting when you see people deliver. But it really does come to pass. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
But when you stop yourself from doing it, but without just stop before trying because you don't feel like the work is going to be as good as it is in your head.
Yes.
Your life goes in the other direction, but you're also not trusting that there are people in the audience, there are people seeing, reading, hearing your work, just like you described, Suze, that can spot raw talent.
Yeah.
So you're denying yourself the opportunity to hear from someone, hey, you've got something here. It needs some work. It needs some polishing, but you've got something here. And our fear of hearing it needs some work keeps us from hearing you've got something here. And I just think, our whole purpose in life in the Spark File is to help people bridge that gap, get over that gap that he's describing and do the work.
And it is like the motto of the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. Do you have an appetite to risk, fail, risk again? Risk, fail,
risk
again. Risk, fail, risk again. Because that's not the most comfortable place to live. It's not. Yeah.
If you're looking for comfort, you might want to look elsewhere.
But if you're looking for pure, creative, self-expressed satisfaction, it's a great place to live.
That's right.
Yeah.
Suze, I want to go back to don't pickle it.
Don't pickle it,
because
baby.
I was thinking, I love this advice of like, don't save all of your good stuff. I love it in that context. I also thought and had an immediate reaction to don't pickle it in terms of your emotions and, your emotional needs and anger and things that we let resentments. Don't pickle it. Don't let it sit there and,
stew
fester. And fester. Don't soak in, a jar full of resentment. So that's what occurred to me.
I love that. I love that.
Don't pickle it.
Here's a little piece of advice that my friend Joe Deere posted on his Facebook wall. In 2006, a high school English teacher asked their students to write a famous author and ask for advice. And sidebar, I think that they must have asked the authors to come speak at their school, maybe. The students received one response, and it contained some great advice. Dear Xavier High School and Ms. Lockwood and Messrs. Perrin, McFeely, Batten, Mauer, and Congista, I thank you for your friendly letters. You sure know how to cheer up a really old geezer in his sunset years. I don't make public appearances anymore because I now resemble nothing so much as an iguana. What I had to say to you, moreover, would not take long. To wit, practice any art, music, singing, dancing, acting, drawing, painting, sculpting, poetry, fiction, essays, reportage, no matter how well or badly, not to get money and fame, but to experience becoming, to find out what's inside you, to make your soul grow. Seriously, I mean, starting right now, do art and do it for the rest of your lives. Draw a funny or nice picture of Ms. Lockwood and give it to her. Dance home after school and sing in the shower and on and on. Make a face in your mashed potatoes. Pretend you're Count Dracula. Here's an assignment for you tonight, and I hope Ms. Lockwood will flunk you if you don't do it. Write a 6-line poem about anything, but rhymed. No fair tennis without a net. Make it as good as you possibly can, but don't tell anybody what you're doing. Don't show it or recite it to anybody, not even your girlfriend or parents or whatever, or Ms. Lockwood, okay? Tear it up into teeny weeny pieces and discard them into widely separated trash receptacles. You will find that you have already been gloriously rewarded for your poem. You have experienced becoming, learned a lot more about what's inside you, and you have made your soul grow. God bless you all. Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh, nice one, Kurt.
Nice one, Kurt.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I also want to
Nice.
say, and this is completely, I'm going rogue here, but there's a piece of, this is a piece of advice from Kurt Vonnegut that I learned from our friend Jonathan Bernstein. Hi, Jonathan Bernstein.
Hi, Jonathan.
And he's incorporated it into curriculum, and I think about it all the time. And the shorthand for it is piece of cake. I hope I'm not getting this wrong. And if I am mutating it, my apologies. But it was Kurt Vonnegut's father was having trouble getting up out of a chair. Like their mobility had diminished and they were having trouble getting up out of a chair. And so they practiced this thing where Kurt would stand in front of his father and they would like say, piece of cake. And then he would stand up out of the chair. And I try to do it when I am doing something that my body or my mind tells me this is hard. It's a little bit like the what would it feel like if this was easy? That the great Kate Cayenne shared with us.
Yes,
I
that's
sometimes will just like before a take on a, like if I'm shooting a scene on a TV show or before something that we're going to do that I'm sort of like, here we go. This might be hard.
Boy.
I just think or say piece of cake,
Piece of cake.
piece of cake.
How great.
Yeah.
Wow, I like that.
So there's a little
Piece of cake.
more from Kurt Vonnegut. So, but all of this, I love this. And all of it seems like pretty good advice.
Yeah.
But what about bad advice?
Oh.
This led me to an article in the New York Times by Adam Grant, the psychologist, author, and organizational psychology professor at the Wharton School. Super fancy. The article is titled, "We Get and Give Lots of Bad Advice. Here's How to Stop." Now, when Adam Grant is talking about bad advice, I think he's talking not about things like don't pickle it and piece of cake.
Yeah.
I think he's talking about the advice that we get. Like, say you're a young person and you want advice about where you should move or what you should do with your career or your life or what school you should go to. Or even if you're an older, you're a more seasoned person and you're sort of like, should I accept this job? Should I not accept this job? I think Adam Grant's talking about that more in-depth advice. But I was interested in this, Cami, because we're in a position as coaches, we offer advice to people all the time, and our advice is sought all the time.
You're right.
So Adam Grant, so this is what we're talking about, this deeper, more nuanced type of advice. And Adam Grant was saying in this article, he believes that the problems around advice can begin with who we approach for advice. So young people might rely on their parents or grandparents for instance, career guidance, forgetting that their parents and grandparents were raised in an era where it was common to spend an entire career at one organization.
In one place.
That's right.
That's right. That's right.
So Adam Grant cites this blogger, Tim Urban, who said on their podcast, there are some times you should listen to Nana, but career is not one of them. And I was like, that's sound advice. So
we were talking about that. Like, remember when I reread Twyla Tharp's The Creative Habit?
Yes, I do.
And she like dug her heels in on like, you can only be one type of artist. That's it. If you even think about being a hyphenate, it's like career suicide.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is such an old way of thinking. The world has changed. We were both probably told that to certain degrees. And that's why you don't listen to Nana on career advice.
I remember being told by, we might have talked about this on the Twyla Tharp podcast, by an older casting director, was essentially like, pick a lane. Pick a lane.
That's right.
Is it voiceover? Is it going to be theater, regional theater?
Are you a writer? Are you an actor?
And even then I was like, that's some crusty old advice. Yeah.
And also how boring.
Yeah.
Like I think we've all determined we want to keep growing and learning and we should live in a world where we can.
Yeah. Yeah. So the core of Adam's advice on giving good advice, I quote to you, when people come to us for advice, people rarely need to hear our conclusion. They benefit from hearing our thought process and our perspective on the relevant criteria for making the choice. The most useful advice doesn't specify what to do. It helps people see blind spots in their thinking and clarify their priorities. So I thought this was genius. And Adam says when students come to him for advice, he begins by asking them what they want. Are they looking for him to validate a decision that they've already made, or challenge their assumptions, or help them think through the considerations? And this reminds me of a spark I got from you, Laura. Do you want sympathy or solutions? It's not exactly what Adam Grant is talking about, but it's related to it. It's sort of like,
yes, it is.
What are you seeking is the first question.
That's right.
That's right. And then if Adam Grant shares a lesson from his own experience, he makes sure to qualify how it may or may not apply to the student. So Adam will say, here's how I landed on my career. Which aspects of my approach make sense for you and which ones don't, which I think is brilliant, because I think so often the advice that people seek us out for, it's creative advice, and there's a million paths that one could take. There is not one right answer. So to qualify it by saying, here's how we've approached this in the past, but you need to ask yourself, does that make sense for you?
That's right.
Are there aspects of this that make sense for you and aspects that don't? So I just love this. Adam goes on to say, at some point, you've probably noticed that you're wiser when giving advice to others than you are in making decisions for yourself. But you're not alone. In psychology, it's called Solomon's paradox, and it often happens because we have more distance from other people's challenges and problems than we have from our own. And the lesson here is that one of the most effective ways to get better advice is to give it. And psychologists find that our reasoning becomes wiser when we think about our own problems from a third person perspective, which I thought was really, really so it's basically reflecting on what you would tell someone who asked you a similar question. Adam said, listen to the advice that you give to others. It's usually the advice you need to take yourself, and it might be the best way to motivate yourself too. I just think this is so, I think it's so interesting. He talks about how sometimes, and as coaches, I really responded to this. Sometimes when you're giving advice, it's actually more motivating. We're more motivated in our own creativity than it might be for the recipients of the advice. So if you want to be motivated, like, give people advice.
Suze, I sometimes I think, wow, did we,
Yes.
did we? I don't even need to ask the question.
Yes.
We went into this knowing that the more we helped others, the more we would help ourselves. The more we help ourselves, the more we help others.
That's right.
And the idea of committing ourselves completely to helping ourselves shine our light, helping other people shine their light, helping get creative work out into the world, up and out is what we always refer to as. And that is that is the biggest gift that we could do, like selfishly and also altruistically.
Yeah.
So this idea of like what every time we give advice and we hear ourselves say it, it's like, it's just,
it does become
creating that
a cycle
pathway
of inspiration and motivation. It sure does.
Yes.
It sure does. So that was a bunch of advice, but what do we make of it? Just a few things. I've lived by this for a while, but I'm going to continue to remember it and reinforce it to myself, not to pickle my things. I want to use my things and my ideas and my body and my brain and my resources now.
Yes.
And trust that
love it.
If I wear it out, then that will open the door to a new thing that will invite new ideas. That will, you know what I mean? I love that.
There will be more.
Yeah.
There are more ideas right behind this one.
That's right.
Ready to be shared.
That was just thinking back on our conversation with Paul Wontorek. He's somebody who's always been a source of inspiration for me and he talked about it on our podcast, how he's sort of like, he has no shortage of ideas, and the more ideas that he brings to the surface and utilizes, they multiply like little bunnies. The more come to them, spark bunnies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes.
When giving advice, I'm going to remember that in most nuanced cases regarding someone's creativity or their career, telling them what we've done is not always the most productive angle, but demonstrating how we think through something is a more useful strategy. And I'm thinking specifically, we communicate with our clients via Voxer. We sort of have this walkie-talkie system where they can share with us and we can share back. And I just this past week shared a mental perspective on something. I shared the inside of my brains and how I think about something. And that really seemed to be useful for the person. And I think that bears that idea out.
It's a little bit of like teach a man to fish.
Yes.
And Matt Goldman has been one of my mentors for my whole life. He's one of the founders of Blue Man. And he would always, like, one of the things he did was like teach me and others the thought process. How did he get to this answer? So not just telling you the answer.
Teach a person.
How did you get there?
Yeah.
And so then he would even say, Laura or whoever else, like the people he knew he taught the thought process to, he'd be like, well, if that's the conclusion that Laura came to, I know she came to it by going through this process. And I trust that where she arrived was where I would arrive because we thought through it in a similar way. And he didn't have to micromanage. Like it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I think it's great. Another, what do we make of it? If you are seeking some good advice, think about how you would counsel yourself in the third person. As Nancy Klein teaches in her book, Time to Think, often the mind that asks the question holds the best answer. So that's just a few, what do we make of it?
Yes.
That's my spark. I hope you enjoyed
That's your spark, and it's a great one. That was super, super fun.
Yay!
Hey, do you want to hear my spark?
I do, but first I want to pee.
Let's pee.
Back in a sec.
And we're back.
Cams, what you got for me?
Suze, I feel like I have been Well, first of all, there's like a strange coincidence that you'll hear it when I say it.
Ooh.
I have been reading nonstop this week about quitting. Quitting, Suze. Specifically, the sheer number of Americans quitting their jobs right now.
What?
Quitting their jobs rather than going back into the office. The LA Times ran a piece called "Welcome to the Summer of Quitting, Why Many of Us Are Saying Goodbye to Our Jobs." And Axios called it the Great Resignation. They say that upwards of 40% of workers are thinking about quitting their jobs. Some people playing the politics game may say that, it's because people found out they can make more money on unemployment than they can working their jobs.
No,
so they'd
it's
rather
not.
sit on
It's
the couch.
because people have had time to contemplate what they're doing with their one wild and precious life, isn't it?
Yes!
Oh my
Yes.
God.
So, yes. So then a few weeks ago, the New York Times ran a piece by Adam Grant. Susan,
You're kidding me.
what are the odds that you and I would, this is the first time either one of us has quoted Adam Grant, and now it's happening in the same.
I've talked about Adam Grant.
You
before.
have?
I have.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, what are the
still,
odds?
What are the odds?
It's Adam's world. We're all just living in it.
Apparently.
Okay. So a few weeks ago, the New York Times ran a piece by Adam Grant titled, "There's a Name for the Blah You're Feeling. It's called Languishing." And suddenly we all had a name for the sense of the dulled motivation and focus many of us have been feeling.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I started to notice everyone's like, languishing, you're languishing. I don't know, how are you? I'm languishing.
I am
It became
languishing.
like a thing. We're languishing, right? So Grant writes, "At first, I didn't recognize the symptoms that we all had in common. Friends mentioned that they were having trouble concentrating. Colleagues reported that even with vaccines on the horizon, they weren't excited about 2021. A family member was staying up late to watch National Treasure again, even though she knows the movie by heart." Hey, I would too. It's good. Instead of bouncing out of bed at 6 a.m., I know that one made me giggle so hard too. Instead of bouncing out of bed at 6 a.m., I was lying there until 7 playing words with friends. It wasn't burnout. We still had energy. It wasn't depression. We didn't feel hopeless. We just felt somewhat joyless and aimless. It turns out there's a name for that: languishing. So languishing is a sense of stagnation and emptiness. It feels as though you're muddling through your days, looking at your life through a foggy windshield, and it might be the dominant emotion of 2021. Grant asserts that many people are struggling with the emotional long haul of the pandemic. Whereas in the early days of the pandemic, our amygdala,
Fight or flight.
the brain's built-in threat detection system, was on high alert at all times, fight or flight or freeze. But as time wore on, obviously we cannot stay in that state forever, and anguish has given way to languish. And part of the problem, Grant says, is that when you're languishing, you might not notice the dulling of delight or the dwindling of drive. You don't catch yourself slipping slowly into solitude. You're indifferent to your indifference. Essentially, Grant says, we need to name it to tame it. Giving it a name helps us all collectively speak a common language and acknowledge the feeling in ourselves and in others. He even talks about how last summer, the journalist Daphne K. Lee introduced us all to the Chinese expression that translates roughly into revenge bedtime procrastination.
Oh, yes.
Revenge bedtime procrastination, which we talked about on the Spark File.
We sure did.
One definition of it is staying up late at night to reclaim the freedom we've missed during the day. Grant says, I started to wonder if it's not so much retaliation against a loss of control as an act of quiet defiance against languishing. It's a search for bliss on a bleak day, connection in a lonely week, or purpose in a perpetual pandemic. In another New York Times article by Kevin Roos, Christina Wallace, a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School, says, "We've all had a year to evaluate if the life we're living is the one we want to be living."
There you go.
Especially for younger people who have been told to work hard, pay off your loans, and someday you'll get to enjoy your life. A lot of them are questioning that equation.
Yeah.
What if they want to be happy right now?
Yeah.
Don't pickle it. Don't pickle it.
Yeah.
So I feel that, Suze, and as you know, I have been desperately craving a collective reassessment. Like, before we all just jump back into doing what we did before, can we please take a moment to assess what we want our lives to be filled with, how we want to spend our time, what do we want to dedicate our talents to? I mean, what are we doing here? Can we just check in real quick? I just want a collective check-in. And then yesterday, I came across a Fast Company article by Ruth Reeder called "Post-Pandemic Life Has Thrust Us into the Sixth Stage of Grief, the Search for Meaning." The search for meaning. According to Fast Company, in the wake of the pandemic and 3.7 million deaths worldwide, many people are feeling the need to throw off the entrapments that no longer serve us.
Yes.
We are languishing. There's that word again. A condition that can only be treated by making shifts in our lives. And according to Fast Company, people are making changes. The Great Reassessment has Americans rethinking where and how they want to work. Pew Research reports that 66% of Americans are thinking of changing fields. Others are considering a longer sabbatical to spend more time with family and figure out what kind of work really matters to them.
Yeah.
A phenomenon Kevin Roos of the New York Times coined the YOLO economy. You only live once.
Yeah.
While many may be leaving behind menial jobs that didn't pay, some people are leaving good jobs, perhaps feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
And the article goes on, it's not just work. People have also relocated. One survey found that 16% of adults moved during the pandemic. Some of those departures were just hastened exits, people who were planning to move in the future but just moved up their timelines. Others realized the importance of space in the confines of COVID-19 restrictions. Some moves were strategic, in with family that could help take care of the kids. But they may also be part of a larger trend of disruption. Experts expect divorces to spike. We are reconsidering everything. Friendships, God, how we dress, whether or not college is worth it, all the notions we once took for granted.
Yeah.
And this made me happy. I mean, not the divorces and whether or not college is worth it. I'm happy to know that people are really doing the work, the reflection, the assessment to determine what's it all for them.
Yeah.
As many people have said, we're all likely in one stage or another of pandemic grief. And in grief terminology, the search for meaning is known as the sixth stage of grief. In Fast Company, David Kessler, the author of Finding Meaning, the Sixth Stage of Grief, who we have also talked about previously on the Spark File.
Yeah.
Kessler says, what I try to help people understand is meaning is not in that horrific event. Meaning is in us afterward. I think about what my therapist says. You cannot process a trauma while you are going through the trauma. That meaning comes afterwards, and it's in you. Kessler's concern is that we should all go slow in this reassessment of our lives because we are still, in essence, going through it. Making extreme alterations to your life while you're experiencing grief is like operating heavy machinery while drunk. He advises against it. He does think we should follow that urge to reevaluate our lives, but in his opinion, like, let's not try to rush a major metamorphosis, which is a phrase I've been thinking a lot lately. Strangely, not because of this. I was thinking it for other reasons. I was like, you cannot rush metamorphosis. But Kessler believes that there can be relief even in the small epiphanies. And I'm just like, this is uncanny, because the spark you did recently about the art of gathering, Priya Parker has us asking some questions, but that are, specific to sort of the gatherings in our life. But, but I wanted to ask you, like, what do you think? Do you have an idea of what you'll take with you into the next chapter and what you'd like to leave behind?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes I've heard that advice before. When I started meditating, I remember Emily Fletcher cautioning us and saying, don't make any rash life changes. A little bit like what David Kessler's saying, where it's sort of like, before you quit your job, get a divorce, like, just know that your system is going to be going through some changes with the addition of meditation. And so don't do anything rash. But I will tell you, with the pandemic and with meditation, some things have been brewing for a long time. And I was like, nope, I'm pretty clear about it.
Yeah.
And so, it doesn't, I'm like, that being said, it may take a little while longer to put the structures in place to let some of that stuff go and leave it behind.
And that makes perfect sense.
What about you?
I do. And this won't surprise you at all. I would like to leave behind any and all competing for the suffering trophy.
Oh,
I'm not interested in competing in the area of busyness and overworking. I'm out of that game. I'm checking out. I'm done.
My answer is your answer.
Oh yeah? Yeah, I'm done. And to all those people who are competing for it, I say, congratulations. It is all yours. I relinquish my hands from this trophy. I want to work smart with more ease and more joy. And we are well on our way to this. Like, we've been building this prior to the pandemic. So I feel very, very grateful for that. But I want to leave behind a completely packed schedule and the sense of rushing everywhere, rushing. Goodbye to that. I want a more porous schedule that we talk about all the time, that allows me to, like, take my time arriving at my destination.
Yes.
I'd like to take with me the joy of the work that we're doing together, Suze. It feels purposeful and intentional, and I'm so grateful for it. All of these articles about people leaving their jobs because they do not feel passion or purpose from them, well, I feel like, again, we got to jump on that, like, pre-pandemic.
Yes.
When we decided to create the Spark File.
Agreed.
And follow our own creativity and our joy in helping others cultivate their creativity.
Yeah, agreed.
I think those are the top things that come to mind for me, that I am so ready. And you're right. These are things that were brewing before.
Yeah.
The things I'm leaving behind. These are things that I'm like, I did not think I could step off the ride, that crazy train ride.
I'm with you on this. I want a kinder, gentler way of life that, to a certain extent, I mean, we worked our asses off during the pandemic. We did.
Yes.
We did.
We did.
And then I get nervous about the world reopening, because I'm sort of like, oh, now we're going to work our asses off, and we're going to be required to do it in person sometimes, which means commuting and stuff like that, and social invitations. But I don't know. I'm interested in this. I'm very, very interested in this.
I think we're both committed to it. And the thing is, like, it's not going to arrive at perfection and stay there. I think it's a balance. It's a balancing act. And we're always going to feel like, oh, there's too much space in our schedule. Oh, no, there's not enough space in our schedule. And like a little teeter-totter, we will be always trying to delicately balance that.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about like the work environments that I've been in, before, and please, if you are a former coworker of mine and you hear me saying this, I
enjoy.
fully expect that you would be saying, but Laura, you helped create that culture and I am guilty.
Yeah.
I am absolutely guilty. I played the game and it was important to me that my work ethic never be doubted and people just simply like, well, no one works harder than me. Like you could question any number of things, but you couldn't question that. And so for that, I want to apologize to all my former coworkers. But I think now about something that my friend and incredible life coach, Joanne Heyman, said. She said it's about learning the difference between being invaluable and being valued. And I think the younger me and the cultures that I've worked in, it's a fallacy, by the way, that anyone is invaluable because you can and will be replaced at any time. But we tell ourselves that story that I will make myself invaluable. This place can't go on without me. They couldn't cut me because I'm integral to the fabric of this. Yep. The wheels would fall off. And that's the game we play. That's the story we tell. When in fact, what we are really yearning for is to be valued for what we contribute, which can be done with boundaries in place. It can be done by, Suze, I don't think either one of us want any of our clients to feel like I can't do it without Laura and Susan. I can't, but I just can't.
Of course.
The point is that our contributions to their work are valued and have value and are meaningful in the steps that they're taking along their journey, but they are doing the work. And I feel like it's a very important distinction. I think it is one that
sounds like
smart
a piece of
consultants,
good advice.
Joanne Heyman's amazing. And I think smart consultants have this figured out. They don't ever come into their goal is never like, I'm going to step into this company and make it so the company can't work without me.
Yeah. I'm
No.
Yep.
Their goal is step into this company, help some light bulbs go off in the minds of some of these people, help them see how they could be working more efficiently, how they could be working better, and then step off. So I want to take that with me. That's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. And back to your earlier point about where we're at now, where we'd like to see ourselves, I just want to refer back to a beautiful piece of advice that we just shared. Things don't have to be perfect to be wonderful. That it is going to be imperfect until, always, but it can also still be wonderful.
Yes. And yes. And I think it is wonderful. So what do we make of all this?
What do we make of it?
I think we make a concerted effort to assess our lives in a thoughtful way. Adam Grant says in that New York Times article that the concept of flow may be the antidote to languishing. Flow is that elusive state of absorption in a meaningful challenge or a momentary bond where your sense of time, place, and self melts away. To find flow, you must step away from some of the distractions of the attention economy, all those things that pull at you, bouncing around from task to social media to television to task. You can't find flow when you can't find focus. Flow requires focus. In an article in the Harvard Business Review by Teresa M. Amabile and Stephen J. Kramer, they write, Suze, I think you're going to like this. In our recent research on creative work inside businesses and through exhaustive analysis of diaries kept by knowledge workers, we discovered the progress principle. Of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perceptions during the workday, the single most important is making progress in meaningful work. Making progress in meaningful work. I'm fascinated by this study, and I think we will likely offer up a full serving of that spark one day. But as it relates to this moment, we have businesses offering more money or more days off, trying to entice workers to stay or even just lure them back into the office. But they would be smart to hone in on helping workers feel how meaningful their work is and creating systems that would allow them to feel progress in that meaningful work. Again, of all the things that boost emotions and motivations and perceptions during a workday, the single most important is making progress in meaningful work. As individuals, I think we need to focus on the things that are meaningful to us and commit the uninterrupted time to making progress on them. Whether that be a hobby that you're interested in or a creative project you've been wanting to create, following through and seeing the progress is one of the most meaningful things you can do. Give yourself the gift of getting into flow as often as you possibly can. Dr. Corey Keyes, and we know people who can articulate that is my goal, be in flow as much as possible.
Kenyatta Emmanuel. Yes.
Kenyatta, thank you for that. Dr. Corey Keyes, a professor of sociology at Emory University, says in a New York Times article by Danny Bloom, most important for overall well-being, Dr. Keyes said, is being interested in life. A sense of satisfaction or happiness tends to follow that. The pandemic has challenged us because we haven't been able to pursue many of our previous interests. He said the first key to feeling good about life is to seek out new interests. And Bloom writes, as you emerge from pandemic life, try to reconnect with a community you've missed. It might be going back to church or choir practice, a running group or yoga class, or even just hanging out at your local coffee shop. Don't be afraid to chat with a stranger, reconnect with your barista, or strike up a conversation at the dog park. That's that positive social interaction, Suze, that you talked about in your burnout spark.
Completing the stress response. Yep.
That's right. You heard it here first, friends. Find something that sparks you, something that gets those synapses firing off in your brain. By acknowledging that so many of us are languishing, we can start giving voice to the quiet despair and lighting a path out of the void toward more meaningful work.
Wow.
That's me spark.
That's me spark. And I'm sticking to it.
That's me spark.
Yeah. That is a sparktopus. That is so fascinating. And Laura, I don't know if this is exactly the struggle that I have been experiencing. I don't know. I feel like I need to sit with this a little bit longer and consider what the source of is it languishing? Is it just fatigue? Yeah. Like, what is it? But this has given me a lot to think about.
Well, I think as I alluded to in the Spark, if you and I had not started the Spark File prior to the pandemic, I think that we might have been distraught and losing our minds during the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I also think we might have come to it during the pandemic. We might have been like, we must articulate our purpose, something meaningful, and make progress toward it. The thing is, we may be languishing in terms of, just the circumstances of this pandemic, but I think that we are making progress towards meaningful work every day. And I think that's been our lifeline. I mean, besides our partners and our loved ones.
I couldn't agree more. I think it transformed the experience of going through the pandemic to continue to remain curious, to have, like Kurt Vonnegut said, to have those deadlines where we had to surface and craft sparks, and we had the accountability of each other that we're going to share with each other. I also think it's the kind of thing, we've talked about this before, but where they say, if you want to remain if you want to maintain brain health, learn a language, do crossword puzzles, etc. I'm like, we're doing that with the Spark File. We're always learning, and we can feed it into ourselves, nutrients into ourselves, but also we put it straight back into our teaching work and our coaching work and our creativity.
Oh my gosh.
And all of this works in concert to do many of the things that you just said. And yet, I think that there's also pieces of this that you can't get around. You have to go through the grieving of it, like loss of life and just like grief.
That's right.
Grief.
I mean, I think that we can have progress towards meaningful work, but we can also be grieving. We can still feel grief, and I believe we are.
So I heard something recently, and it was in preparation to make that spark about, like your parents are dead. And it was one of those authors talking about how each event that you experience is its own separate grief, and it must be grieved separately. And so on one tip, I feel like you and I have had this lifeline of creativity and real meaningful connection with each other and with our clients throughout the pandemic. And it has kept us, it has been a life raft. And then there's another separate grief around things, loss of life, political, the Capitol breach, things like that. The murder of George Floyd, all of those things, Breonna Taylor, like all of those separate things that must be processed.
Grieved. Processed and grieved separately. Oof, you're right.
I will say that I'm thankful that we have had this. It's like you say in the introduction, that this creative lifeline that we have been able to hold on to throughout this.
Yep. And I think that not only do we, get to feel progress in the work that we're doing, but we have this like double celebratory feeling when we see our clients make progress toward the work that they're doing. It's like
true.
Gift after gift. It's like a cycle of gifts. Yeah,
it is. It is a cycle of inspiration. That is a great spark, and I can't wait to share it.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I loved your spark too.
I guess that's it. That's it.
So. That's it.
This episode of the Spark File was made on Muncie, Lenape, and Seminole land. And as always, we do hope that it put another bunch of sparks in your file. But listen, if there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and you fanned it into a creative flame and you want to share that, email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you got to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
You can follow us on social media at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. It really does help other listeners find us, especially if you subscribe. Also, if you like this podcast, we hope that you'll share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, you can suck a butt.
So elegant.
Thank you.
Suck a butt. Hey, if something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing. I don't know. Make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
Don't pickle it. Suck a butt. You got to take it.
And make it.
Make it.
Oh, friends. Bye.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.